r/NoSleep. Posted by u/hymnofshadows. My summer camp experience didn't go as planned. Part 1. The noise in the woods. Hey Reddit, there's a reason I'm sharing this with you guys. As I type this, there is a car parked down at the end of my street. It's a different car every night and it never moves. But the location is the exact same. I know it's undercover police, and they're supposed to be protecting me. But I still don't feel safe with what I know. You may have seen me or what happened on the internet, but probably not. What happened was quickly scrubbed away, complete extinction of information. So I've turned to here to spread the truth. For my own safety and several others, I have changed the name of some people and businesses. It's a long story but I need to get everything out there. I'm gonna start at the very beginning, so here you go. The long, white, and metallic bus sat still on the cracked cement road in front of me. I was standing still, observing it, with my bags strapped around my body. We were standing outside a large airport, with cars and taxis driving all around, and the hot summer sun beating down. Other kids of all shapes and sizes were moving around me and entering the bus. I looked around to see who my future campmates were going to be. I was immediately let down when I saw a kid wearing a backwards hat, expensive sunglasses, and a chain. He was bothering some girl who clearly wanted to be left alone. I tried not to judge people right off the bat, but something about him sat with me wrong. I let out a sigh and followed the rest of the crowd. "This is different," a short kid in front of me spoke. "What do you mean?" A taller guy next to him responded. "Normally we have to ride on shitty cheese wagons, and they got no AC. These buses are way nicer. The camp has gotten even cheaper, so I don't know how they could have afforded this." It was difficult to press through the crowd and get on the 3-step staircase, and I was met with a loud chorus of laughing and yelling as I stepped into the aisle. I stopped and scanned the seats for an open one, and my eyes fell on one near the front next to some brown-haired kid, wearing a video game sweatshirt, looking out of the window, with headphones on. I took a slow step but was suddenly pushed in the back by a large kid with glasses and a buzz cut. "Sorry, man," I apologized to him. He just gave me a look before squeezing his way past me. Reluctantly, I sat down next to brown hair before I was pushed again. I was not looking forward to being stuck on this bus for a long time after being in a plane for 3 hours. I'd also never been to anything like this before. All my life I had grown up with kids I knew from my school. Going off to a summer camp with almost entirely strangers was odder than I thought. Brown hair turned to look at me. "Hey, I'm David," I gave him a little nod. "Philip," he stuck out his hand, and I returned a shake. He weakly shook back and turned back around to look down at his phone, presumably changing his song. I sighed and looked around. Everyone else who had sat down was on their phones too. I sighed and pulled mine out. The only notification I had on the lock screen was a text from my mother telling me goodbye. I imagined she was very sad now, riding home, crying maybe. I had tried to convince her not to on the way here to drop me off, telling her it was only for about a month I would be gone. It hardly had any effect. She teared up anyway. "All right everyone, be quiet." A shout bellowed from the front of the bus and jolted me from my thoughts. I looked up and observed a middle-aged man wearing a hat standing in the front holding a clipboard. A hush fell over the bus in response to his yell. One by one he began to call out everyone's name in alphabetical order. After I responded to him calling my name, I laid my head back to sleep. It was still early, around 6 in the morning, and dark outside. I heard the engine of the bus start up as I drifted off into a slumber. "Hey, can you move your legs please?" My eyes slowly opened as I came back into consciousness. Someone was tapping my shoulder. It was bright now, and the bus was loud with chatter again. I rolled my head over and saw it was Philip tapping me. "I gotta use the restroom dude," he said. I nodded and moved my legs, which were numb now, back. He got up and walked towards the back of the bus. I looked down at my phone, which was still in my hand. It read 12:32. I felt my stomach growl and had the urge to pee too. I hadn't eaten any breakfast this morning as I had just gotten in the car as soon as I woke up. Now that I actually had some rest I could fully focus on where I was. A red-headed guy with curly hair was sitting on the seat across from me, eating a granola bar. "Hi, I'm David. Do you know when we get off for lunch?" I asked. "We should be stopping soon, I think. I'm in, by the way." He shook my hand. I looked over to see only a bag in the seat next to him. "You're lucky you got a row to yourself," I said to him. "Yeah, well, I was like the first person on here and I just told everyone that it was taken." I scooted back as Philip sat back down, and got up to head to the restroom myself. Some guy in the back was trying to play rap music over a speaker, but quickly got shut down. I looked around for my friend Tyler in the seats as I made my way down the aisle, but didn't see him. I figured he must have taken another bus, or just got a ride up from his parents. I opened the restroom door and took one whiff before almost gagging. I heard laughter coming from the row in the back next to it. Someone totally dropped a load in there, bro. I wouldn't go in there. I looked over to see the guy with the backwards hat speaking. He was sitting next to two other guys who were dressed similarly. Yeah, I totally stunk it up earlier, just to mess with everyone, the guy in the middle laughed. I rolled my eyes and stepped in anyway, but stopped when I felt the bus turn. I looked out the window to see we were turning into the parking lot of a mall. I figured we were stopping to get lunch and made my way back up to my seat to get my wallet. I had to push my way to get there, as everyone was standing up. Everyone sit back down until we have stopped completely. I heard the shout of the clipboard man come from the front of the bus again. Everyone complied quickly and I did a little sprint to get back to my seat before I would get in trouble. Getting in trouble is the last thing I wanted to do on this trip. I sat down next to Philip in my seat and fumbled around my little bag for my wallet. My fingers brushed against the leather of my wallet and I pulled it out. I waited till there was some space in between two people to step back out into the aisle. I was pleasantly surprised as I stepped off the bus, stretching my legs. The weather was surprisingly nice. It was hot but with a cool breeze. I looked around and counted about 20 other people who had gotten off the bus. I moved around to stand next to Philip. Alright, everyone follow me. In case you don't know, my name is Bill Edwards, but you can call me Mr. Edwards. We're all getting lunch at this mall. There are multiple restaurants inside, and you can choose from anyone. You will have an hour and 10 minutes, Billboard spoke to us. Why the extra 10 minutes? I thought to myself as we all walked towards the mall entrance. The second we saw the first vending machines in the mall hallway, a group of people swarmed it. I was happy, as it meant fewer people in line for actual food. We entered the main room, a huge area with skylights and a carousel in the middle. Multiple restaurants were lining the walls. The large group split up as people decided what they were going to eat. What are you getting? I asked Philip. Probably just a sandwich, he responded and walked over to the subway. I couldn't really decide between a sandwich and pizza, and I was starving. We had been on that bus for around 7 hours and weren't even halfway to our destination yet. I decided to get a small pizza. I pulled a $20 bill out of my wallet and headed over to the Pizza Hut. The line was around only 5 people long, and I hadn't had pizza in about a month. While waiting in line I grabbed a newspaper out of a nearby stand. Once my time came I ordered my favorite, sausage and pepperoni, pizza and headed over to sit next to Philip and some other kid I didn't know. He had blonde curly hair and was tall and lanky. Hey, I'm David, I said to him as I sat down. I'm Alexander, he responded. So, I said as I took a bite of my pizza. Have any of you ever been to Camp Meadowlark before? Philip shook his head. This is my second time. I went last year. My younger brother is going to the second session after us, Alexander said to me. What's it like? Is it fun? I've never been to summer camp before. Yeah, it's fun. You might get a little homesick though. Well, what all is there to do? I don't want to spoil it for you. I gave him a frown. Fine. We do what you would expect to do at a summer camp. Ride horses, go hiking, water ski. You know. Well, sorry, I've never been to a summer camp before. The closest has been camping with my dad in the woods for one night. And I hated it. I'd much rather be in a large, soft bed, rather than a sleeping bag on a hard floor. I am with you too, David. I was forced to go here, Philip suddenly chimed in. Yeah, I could tell by that sweatshirt, man. You look like such a nerd, dude. What were you thinking? I gave him a grin to let him know I was just messing around with him. Whatever, dude. I got it at Walmart. It was all I could afford, and I liked the design, he said back. For real though, you might want to get that thing off before any girls see it, Alexander said, and we all laughed. I pulled up the newspaper and read the first article. Protect your pets. A record number of cats and dogs have been going missing from their owners in the following counties. Authorities think mountain lions are to blame. Uh-oh, Alexander responded. Philip suddenly narrowed his eyes at Alexander. I gotta ask, is there anything, out of the ordinary here? He said. Nah, dude, Alexander responded. Sorry, I'm just a huge fan of horror movies. And I don't want to be here, so I just was hoping there was something interesting to come out of it. None of that stuff is actually real. Yeah, I know that, Philip responded and took a bite of his food. You don't know that, Alexander. The whole point is that no one really knows for sure if they are real or not. I mean, the chances of alien life actually existing is not that low. There are thousands of other planets out there in the universe, I said with a smile and a bit of a sarcastic tone. Do you really think that we would not have made contact by now? Alexander asked. I don't know, man. But I doubt they would be bothering us at a simple summer camp. Whatever, I'm gonna go throw away my crap, Alexander said and got up and walked away. I'm not looking forward to camp, Philip said to me. You don't do a lot of outdoor stuff? I asked. No, I don't really like it that much. So, what kind of horror movies do you like? I asked Philip. Mostly slasher movies. Scream is my favorite of all time. That sounds cool. I'm a huge fan of old action movies, especially ones from the 80s. My all-time favorite is Predator. Horror isn't my cup of tea though. Then we can't be friends then. He took a hard bite of his sandwich and then stood up. I felt a sigh of relief when I saw him grin. I'm just screwing around, dude. Come on, everyone's going back to the bus, he said, walking over and throwing his stuff away. I got up and followed him. We stopped at the sight of a group of about 6 kids from the bus stopped in the hallway, facing the large kid with glasses I saw earlier. I saw Backwards Hat among them. I stepped up to the group to make sure they weren't bullying him. Come on, Nixon, I bet you won't do it, a kid with an afro said to Glasses. Don't be a pussy, his tall friend standing next to him said. Nixon was looking at a small clothing store on the side of the mall hallway. His eyes were pointed at one girl working there who couldn't be over 30. Hell, I'll even pay you if you actually get the number, one boy remarked said. I relaxed when I realized they were just doing him to hit on some random girl. Philip and I remained next to the group, waiting to see if he would really do it. Nixon looked like he was practically sweating. Fine, I'll do it, he said and walked into the store. His walk slowed as he got closer to the girl, but he made it there and tapped on her shoulder. We were all grinning. Nixon and the girl awkwardly stared at each other a second before she spoke. How may I help you? She asked gingerly. Hey. I was just wondering if I could have your phone number? Backwards Hat and his friend were roaring with laughter. I was grinning from ear to ear. I'm like, over 10 years older than you, kid, she responded gruffly. Nixon actually looked hurt from the reaction and walked back with his shoulders hunched down. You suck. Backwards Hat said, and they began to walk back down the hallway towards the exit. I followed, with Philip behind me. Those guys don't seem like that big of assholes. Maybe I shouldn't judge a book by its cover, I thought to myself and turned around to introduce myself. Hi, I'm David, I stuck out my hand to the kid with the backwards hat. Sup dude, I'm Matthew, he slapped my hand in a sort of high five. I'm Tucker, the African American gave me the same high five. And I'm Asher, the tall one said. Philip slowly walked over, shoulders hunched. I'm Philip, Philip spoke to them nervously. I could tell he was a little shy. Dude, what the hell are you wearing, bro? Matthew was making a twisted face at Philip's shirt. You mean to tell me you've never played this game before? It's one of the best ever created, man. I stepped in, trying to defend Philip. I haven't touched that nerd shit in years, Matthew responded. And I don't think I've ever played one of those nerdy things in my life. Tucker started laughing. Matthew grinned and walked away, with Tucker and Asher following behind him. I rolled my eyes and began to walk back towards the bus too. Mr. Edwards did not seem like the kind of person to get on the bad side of. As I walked out, I noticed something that caught my attention. Above a vending machine, there was a bulletin board. And on it was an insanely large amount of missing pet posters, more than I'd ever seen at once. I was met with a twinge of sadness and looked away, not thinking about it. All right, but you've never actually been hunting before? Never even shot a gun? I heard voices talking in the chairs next to me. I sighed and rolled over. Philip had left the seat next to me, so I was using both to stretch out, and still had to curl up. I was trying to sleep, but it was near impossible with all the constant talking, and how uncomfortable the bus was. It was around 1 in the morning, and we still hadn't reached the camp yet. There wasn't much talking going on anymore, as most everyone was trying to sleep or on their phones. It's been at least an hour since we'd passed through any towns, as the landscape outside the window was a repetitive slideshow of dark tall trees and looming mountains in the far distance. I reached down for my phone, which had fallen on the floor while I was trying to fall asleep. I picked it up and tried to turn it on, but it had run out of power. My phone was barely old by smartphone standards, and the constant use had taken its toll on the battery. Right now my mom couldn't afford an upgrade though, so I just dealt with it. While I was looking out the window, I had noticed it had been a while since we had seen any other houses or even cars. I figured it was just isolated around this camp. Maybe people just didn't want to live around here and deal with all the camp actives and stuff going on down at the camp. "Wake up, we're almost at the camp," I heard a girl telling another girl behind me. I felt the bus slow down and turn right. The road we were turning onto had a large dark sign at the entrance. I could barely make out what the sign read, but had enough moonlight to make out the words, "Camp Meadowlark" etched across it. The noise picked back up throughout the bus again. I saw buildings again for the first time in a while. These weren't houses though, more like small cabins and sheds, which I imagined were used for some camp activities or stored something. The bus took a turn off the main road we were on and into a U-shaped road that wrapped around a large clearing. The top of the U-shape had a large building, and the sides had multiple cabins. I imagined the large building was the main center for everything that happened at this camp. The sides were wooden with a light brown color and a near black shingled roof. Each side of the U had 2 cabins in the front, and 2 lined up behind, with the same design. I figured those side cabins is where we would be sleeping. The bus came to a slow stop behind another bus that was just pulling out. I imagined it had just dropped off the group of campers that arrived before us. I knew my friend Tyler had been on that bus. As far as I knew, he was the only person from my school who was going to be at camp also. "All right, everybody get up and get moving," I heard Mr. Edwards shout from up front. People were all standing up in the aisles, causing the small lane to become constricted. I reached and grabbed my small black backpack from the cubby above me and stuffed it with the few belongings I had laid out on the seat, like my jacket and my headphones. Philip had been sitting in the empty seat across from me and was trying to reach over the aisle to get his backpack, which had been sitting on the floor at my feet. He couldn't get through all the people, who had formed a line and were beginning to shuffle off of the bus. I reached down and picked it up, and then threw it over the people's heads towards Philip, who almost dropped it. I grinned a little but was too tired to laugh out loud. I waited until the back of the line came, as I didn't want to deal with upsetting anyone by stepping in front of them. Philip stepped behind me and we sluggishly made our way down the aisle and down the steps off the bus. I took a long breath of the fresh air and stretched my legs. It felt good to be off of that bus. People were now crowded around the bottom, trying to get their bags out. "Gather around me when you have your stuff," I heard Mr. Edwards shout. I quickly began to dig through the pile, but it took a while, as my 2 large blue bags didn't really stand out from the others. Once the pile was almost empty, I spotted my 2 bags and groaned as I picked them up, and headed over to the group of other kids huddled around Mr. Edwards. I looked around at everyone else and saw they were just as tired as me. Not a word was being spoken between us. Mr. Edwards scanned the group, then began to speak when he saw he had everyone's attention. "All right, I know you are all tired, but I need you to listen up so we can get this done. Guys and girls are staying on separate sides of the camp. Girls on this side that we parked at, and guys over across the meeting park. Now you guys are not allowed over here under almost all circumstances, unless you have permission from one of the counselors. If you are caught over here, you will be punished." I saw a tall girl wearing the same uniform as Mr. Edwards walking over from one of the cabins to our group. "Girls, you will now separate from us and go with Susan to be sorted into your cabins," Mr. Edwards spoke again. The girls all slowly separated from our group and made their way to Susan, who's standing still without any expression on her face. I figured she was just tired and didn't give it much though. I felt myself begin to drift out of consciousness, but I was jolted back in by Mr. Edwards' loud voice. "All right. Now you boys have been selected to split up into 5 different cabins. If I say you are in cabin 1, come stand to my right, 2 to my left, 3 behind, and 4 in front. 5 behind them. All right. Baker Aaron, cabin 1. He went down the list quickly. I was just hoping I would be in the same cabin as Tyler or Philip. There's something off about this entire place. It gives me a bad feeling, Philip leaned in to whisper to me. You've just been watching one too many horror movies, dude. Yeah, sure, this counselor seems a little strict, but whatever, I said to him. He looked a little more relieved. Philip Jones, cabin 4, Mr. Edwards shouted. I'll see you around. Hopefully, we will have the same cabin. I gave him a little nod. Bye. Philip nodded back and walked over to the cabin 4 group. I waited around in silence, just wanting to get in a bed and get some sleep. I felt myself snapping in out of consciousness, but I was able to stay awake because I was standing. After what felt another 30 minutes, I finally heard the words David Yates, cabin 5, come out of Mr. Edwards's mouth. I sleepily made my way towards a small group of about 4 other guys. They all looked just as tired as I was, aside from one red-headed kid who seemed to be going around trying to start up a conversation. I figured he must have slept the whole way up and just ignored him. Mr. Edwards continued down his list, and no one else came to cabin 5. I figured everyone else in the cabin had arrived in earlier buses. I began to look around the camp, bored, and noticed a stocky man with a near-buzzed haircut walking towards us. I saw his shirt and figured once again this was another counselor. The closer he got, the more I noticed the angry look he carried on his face. Oh great, another angry counselor, I thought, but then I considered maybe he was just having a bad night. All the counselors seemed to be. "Alright guys, my name is James Turner, but you can call me Mr. Turner," he spoke in a serious tone. "I will be your senior counselor for your cabin, which means I'm in charge of all of you guys. If you have questions, troubles, or concerns, you come to me first. Now, let's get to the cabin. It's late and I'm sure we all wanted to get to bed." He cut off, turned around, and began to walk back across the grassy field. We all followed, slowly shuffling, not matching his stride or pace. I looked around and saw a concrete path leading to a little pavilion area on the grassy field, and a huge flagpole behind it. Eventually, we made it to a cabin on the back left side, which I figured had to be cabin 5. I saw Philip and his little group going into the cabin to my right, so I figured that was cabin 4. Up close I could see the cabins were all gray and had 2 medium-sized windows at the far sides of the cabin. A couple of small flat-looking windows were on the long sides and almost all the way up to the roof. There was a door on the actual side we were approaching too, and a door on the small right side. We went in through the door on the side we were approaching, hardly making any sound. The inside of the cabin was all wooden, and lined with normal, fairly small beds, and a few bunks. After my eyes adjusted, I could see that a good number of the beds were already filled with sleeping teenagers, whom I imagined arrived earlier. "You can pick any open bed you want, but do it quietly. Set your stuff down beside it and don't worry about unpacking. You can do all of that tomorrow morning," Mr. Turner whispered before turning around and walking to the far right end of the cabin, and into a little room. I immediately made my way towards a bunk bed, but the short kid from earlier jumped on it first. I was a little annoyed but too tired to care that much. I found a normal bed and fell down on it, throwing my heavy bags to the side of the floor. Other people were also too tired to care where they laid down, so they just jumped on the nearest bed. Luckily they had sheets on, which was more than I expected. The bed itself though was hard, and not very comfortable. At least not as comfortable as my own bed. I had brought my own pillow and had even put it in a camo cover just for the hell of it. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and had only bothered to kick my tennis shoes off. I was tired but still struggled to fall asleep. Everyone else did, and soon the room was completely still and cloaked in darkness. I lay awake listening to the night sounds, and made out crickets, frogs, owls, and even a wolf howl every now and then. I felt myself drifting off to sleep in the peacefulness of the ambience, but I was jolted back into full consciousness when I heard a sound I had never heard before. After a low hooting from an owl, I heard a noise that could only be described as an almost metallic grinding noise. But not like something you would hear at a construction site, instead it sounded like it was trying to mimic an animal's screech. It was far off but long and loud. And for a second, every other noise in the woods was dead silent. Then, the crickets picked up again, and the low hooting of the owl proceeded. Now my mind was racing again. I sat up and looked around to see if anyone else had heard the noise. The room remained as still as a flaccid lake. I began to wonder what could have made such horrible noise. My first thought was a mountain lion, but I've heard mountain lions before, and they didn't have a deep low pitch like this noise did. Although the only mountain lion noises I had ever heard had been on the internet, so I figured it might sound a little different in real life. Then my mind raced to a bear. I knew there were grizzlies out here in the West, and that had been something my mom had been nervous about, and reminded me over and over again to stay far away if I saw a bear. I had just told her that bear attacks were rare, and that the camp had probably taken many precautions to avoid one of their campers being mauled. I waited again for another screech, but one never came, and I eventually drifted off into a deep sleep.